Morning, everybody. Thanks for always having me back. I really do appreciate it. We're going through the Hexagon, which is my claim to fame for CityView Church. Is I'm the guy who said we should put a hexagon around the service. Okay? You might not know that because Jason will never give me credit for that, but I was there. I'm also the guy that says, we have a six-sided shape. We should maybe make our value set be right at 6 because Jason had 5. It was like, I feel like we should throw a 6th one on there. I don't remember what the 6th one is, but if you go through the website, you might find one that seems really weak. That's probably it. But this value that we're doing, that's been there from the beginning. Living in authentic relationships with one another has been around from the beginning. That was like that's probably number 2 or 3. I can remember we wanted to make much of Jesus. I can remember we wanted to lead people far away from Christ, close to Him. And then this guy right here, okay? So this has been a big passion of ours. And you might not know this. Our church started as a life group all the way at First Baptist. There's a group of us that have been together since before 2006, maybe. W was president. That's how long this has been going, and this has been growing together. And it was in that life group that we learned a crazy amount of trust with one another, to where we learned it was very wise for us to open up to each other. It was very wise for us to learn how to be vulnerable, learn how to be authentic. And what we mean by vulnerable and authentic as Christians, being willing to admit we're not very good at this Christ-following thing and need extra help. And the only places we can go to here on this planet is each other. So that's what we're looking at today. And it reminds me of an article that I read recently that disturbed me to my core. Here's a stat that I hope breaks your heart and changes the way you think about everything. Did you know that a big survey of 2,800 workers in the U.S., 18 or older, 90% of those people will go to work sick? Give it to us all. 90% of people surveyed, 2,800 people, if they're sick and they know they're probably contagious, they will go to you, where you work, and pass it right on to you. Now, as a former school teacher, I go, why can't we stop this madness? What is wrong with people using hand sanitizer on the regular? What is wrong with you guys just not washing your hands on the regular? But because you fail to do those simple things, you then come and punish me who do those simple things by showing up to work. Even when I worked at home as CityView Alvin's pastor, my kids kept showing up to my work sick all the time. All the time. And they would touch my iPad, they would touch my phone, make it look like, Dad, we dipped our fingers in vegetable oil and we touched everything you owned. It's like, thanks kids, glad to have you back. Now go wash your clothes and sheets and Lysol everywhere you come in. Here's where it gets crazy. You want to know who the top cities are that do this to us? It's not Houston, because we're awesome. It's Miami, Charlotte. Let's judge them harshly. So the company that put this together, they're called Account Temps. Here's what he had to say. Whether it's due to a large workload, pressure from the boss, or because they can't afford the time off, it's all too common for employees to find a reason to go into the office even though they feel sick and act sick. Now here's where it gets a little crazy. You want to know what age group was the best at not doing this? It's the millennials. The millennials stepped up to the plate and did things for other people. You want to know who's awful at this? It's the boomers and the Zers. So next time somebody says, oh, them snowflake millennials, yeah, well, at least we tried to keep you from getting sick this year. And they probably bail out of work because they know all y'all are going to show up and ruin it. So there you go. There's a lot to be had in that survey. Here's what drives me a little crazy about our culture. We live in a culture, especially in Texas, where we have a hard time admitting we probably need to stop, take a break, change some things, and fix us first before we get back to the slog and drive of everything. Very few people around us like to admit when they're sick and need rest. And what we do is we wear this as a badge of honor. Because I'm so willing to put myself through extra sorts of hell through the week, I should somehow be applauded more for getting everybody sick, but the job got done. Okay? And we are very good at putting on a mask to fake in front of certain people how we actually feel. And this type of idea has very much been a part of the American church, especially in successful, more affluent areas like this side of Pearland. We're very good at pretending like we're doing everything just fine. We're fine. We're fine. How are you today? Fine. Super fine. Your nose is running like a faucet, but you're fine. Okay? So what I want to talk about now that I've totally solved the problem of hand washing here, I want to talk about how we can do a little bit of soul washing with one another. And I want to teach you how to be vulnerable like a boss, because that's where it's at. You and I first have got to get real comfortable with admitting we have a really irrational fear about letting our deep personal hurts out in front of church people. And so because of this, we've debilitated our own church. We've actually made it perform less. We've actually caused it to reach fewer people. We've actually caused more of our brothers and sisters to remain in certain sins that they probably could have gotten helped out of, because some of us here have decided, I'm not letting you know what I'm struggling with ever. I'm just not going to help you by letting you know I'm in the boat with you. See, when hurting people pretend that they are healthy, and then they gather together to talk about how they're going to go out and heal the sick, the outside world as well as the inside world gets a terribly mixed message about who Jesus is and what he can do. Church is quickly becoming a place where hypocrisy is the standard and the healing power of Christ becomes an illusion that nobody believes in. So, the only antidote is vulnerability. Being authentic with one another is the only medicine that we can turn to and correct the confusing message we continue to send out by pretending like we're all super healthy when we know we're not. So let's get into this. Let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Ecclesiastes is one of my most favorite books because this is really a book where God got a hold of my heart. And what it's about is King Solomon has set out to do a bunch of experiments to try and figure out, is there a way to have meaning for this life outside of God? And he tries several different things, like just living only for pleasure, living only for money, living only for being the most famous person in the world. And he tries all these things out, and everything he comes to, he says it's either meaningless or futile or vanity. He basically says, everything I've tried is useless. And at the very end of the book, he comes back to, it's got to be through God. In this section that we're going to read, chapter 4, he has found a lot of things to be meaningless, and he's now examining friendship. And what he's finding is friendship is not the meaning of life, but it is a major key to get through the hardships of life. And so he's going to talk about friendship here. And what I want you to notice, if you ever get around to reading this entire book, which I highly recommend if you're in a really dark, depressing place, is I recommend you notice here is one of the few times Solomon will not call his experiment he's looking at futile or vanity or meaningless. He looks at friendship as this is a major component to finding the meaning of life in God. So Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12, this is what Solomon finds. He says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their efforts. For if either falls, his companion can lift him up, but pity the one who falls without another one there to lift him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can a person keep warm alone? And if someone overpowers one person, 2 can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. See, today, what we want to talk about, when we're talking about authentic relationships, we're talking about having open-handed honesty with one another as Christians. This is the key, according to Solomon, this is the key to getting to having the meaning of life, is open-handed honesty, letting each other know we aren't as strong as we'd like to be to get through all the craziness that this life throws at us. See, the great enemy of the gospel is a lack of honesty with one another, even with our own selves. Authentic relationships calls us to be open with one another in our actions, in our attitudes, and this causes us to become better believers in Jesus. I've got 3 main points for you that I want to go through and a conclusion. The first main point that I want to get to is what happens when you're fallen, but you're refusing to ask for help. The big problem I've always seen in every church I've ever been a part of, and God, for whatever reason, has drilled it into my passion to try to fix, is when I see Christians that are clearly struggling, clearly having a hard time, just finding the love for Jesus. Come here very obediently, very disciplined, but when it comes time to talking about, hey, what can we do to help each other? What can we do to pray for each other? What can we do to be more in each other's lives besides just Sunday morning? Everybody clams up. Everybody gets awkwardly silent. And all of a sudden, we go from being one big, cool family to a whole bunch of individuals who don't like to sit next to each other when it comes to this time. You and I have got to be easier at admitting we're all fallen and we all need help getting back up. And because there is no spiritual medical alert bracelet that we can click to get the ambulance to come help us from an outside, we're actually just going to have to tell each other who are literally right next to you at this moment. That's what we're supposed to do. But let me go in a little deeper on what this kind of struggle brings out of us. First, no one is good at struggling alone. There is not a good person. There are people here who think, I'm really good at struggling with stuff and figuring it out on my own. If you're a male, you have a propensity to just like to really fix some things and have answers to hard questions. And if you're a female who's married to one of those males, you know that's super annoying. And here in Christianityville, like us here at CityView, none of us have the answers to everything. But if you put us all together, we get really close to, as a group, having the answers to most, if not every, struggle. Somebody here on this side is struggling with something someone over here has been through. And the someone over here could actually be really great wisdom for the person struggling on this side of the room. But how are they to ever know that about each other? How are they to ever guess there's someone on the other side of the room that has been through something so similar to what I am going through, unless somebody asks, I need help, or someone offers, I've been through some horrible stuff in life. The only way to bridge this gap is through humiliation. And you and I look at humiliation as, oh, you mean get super embarrassing and awkward with one another? Yeah, kind of. But humiliation comes from the word humility. Humility is what bridges this gap. Being willing to say, I really don't care how people perceive me, so long as they see Jesus has done great work in me. And what happens is we get in these super alone, lone rider, lone wolf type individuality mindsets because you and I want to portray to one another a false reality of ourselves, a false perception of ourselves. We want you to see me as really strong, really moral, really good at the Christianity game because I've learned through all my work years, if you fake it till you make it, you can make lots of money. So now I bring that idea over to church. Well, it just doesn't work that way at church. It does work to get a few paychecks, but it doesn't work here at church. So how do we deal with this? Let's go to my second point. The mighty two. One of the things that causes us to be so willing to put masks on. It's fear, okay? There's even a psychotherapist named Lori Lewin, who's going to back up what I've just said, because I had to search to see like if somebody more credible than a former PE teacher says this. And she says the number one reason why people will not ask their friends for help is fear. It's fear of rejection, fear of losing status, fear of being betrayed by having some private information get disseminated publicly by the friends. But when you read Ecclesiastes, it talks about how, boy, if there's two there, they can really tackle some hard stuff. If you're cold, you can get warm with two people. If you've fallen down, you can get helped right back up with two people. If you go through some real hard hits and someone's literally attacking you, if there's a second person there, they can probably stop the attack. It's real simple math. Two is better than one. But what if you're afraid the one who you need to help you really stinks at helping you? And you just let that fear drive you away from more and more people, because what if in this random 99% chance there's this one Christian who didn't get the clue that you're supposed to love one another? What if I happen to find the one Christian who has not learned how to help anybody? To which you say, yeah, they exist. And I agree. Yeah, there's a few out there that are like, whoo, gosh, go pray some more, please. But for the most part, especially in my limited experience, in my 30 some odd years of going to church, and in my 20 some odd years of actually like trying to be a Christian, I would say the percent chance of you running into people who will love you and help you well is like really high 90s. Really high 90s. That you're going to find people who are extremely helpful, extremely loving, extremely forgiving, extremely understanding, extremely good at going, wow, you're struggling with some huge stuff. I can't even help with that, but I'm going to help you find people who are really good at helping that. And I'm going to sit through this with you. That's what real Christians do. 99% of them, that's what they do. That's what they've always done. That's what they'll always do. You know why? Because Jesus, the Holy Spirit that helped Jesus be raised from the dead, same Holy Spirit in all these people. And when you have that Holy Spirit in you, they have the Holy Spirit in them, good things will happen every time. In fact, let's talk about how we deal with the fear. Let's go to 1 John chapter 4. This one has always blown my mind, still continues to today. And CityView has been a great model for this for me all the years I've struggled with them through stuff. Christ has manufactured a solution to this loneliness fear trap. In 1 John 4, 18 through 21, this is what the Apostle John taught very new Christians how it works. He says in chapter 4, verse 18, there is no fear in love. Instead, perfect love drives out all fear, because fear involves punishment. So the one who fears has not reached perfection in love. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he is a liar. For the person who does not love his brother cannot love God who he has not seen. And we have this command from him. The one who loves God must also love his brother. So there you have it. In 1 John 4, this is what all Christians have. We have access to perfect love. And you might be thinking, I don't know who I can trust to go unlock some real stuff to. And I would say this person he describes, the person who hates his own brother, don't go to that guy. He has hate in his heart. There's a good possibility he's not truly Christian. Because he says, if you're truly Christian and you can love a God you can't see, you can certainly love people you see all the time. So, if you're worried about being betrayed by somebody, if you find somebody who goes, you know what, I hate that guy in our church, okay, don't go to him. Just mark him off. That's not the one to open up to. But then literally everyone else who doesn't say, I hate that guy in my church, write them down as good potential. Okay? Perfect love. The great news is that all of us who have been born again have the same Holy Spirit. Therefore, we have the ability to channel perfect love at any moment. Literally today, as I was driving over here, it's been a long weekend. I'm so tired right now. But as I was driving here, I just prayed and asked God to help me channel into some perfect love. Because I knew I was going to have to sing some songs. And I knew it was going to be songs I hadn't learned quite yet. And that always frustrates me just a hair, that I don't know the words or the rhythms, because I do like singing. So I was already annoyed. Again, so many finger marks on my iPad. I tried to keep it away from them so I could use it today. But again, vegetable oil, that's what they do. Don't know where they get it from, but it's all over my iPad screen. My wife won't throw away cups in the car. I don't know what that's about. But I needed some perfect love. And so what I did was I remembered Jesus put a heart in me that's not my own. He put his heart in me through the Holy Spirit. And I said, hey, Holy Spirit, could you help me grow up a little and not take things so annoyingly? And he very graciously humbled me to not care about the cups. And again, like as I tell you, it's like, I can't talk to Danielle about the cups. I can't leave here and go to Danielle and say, what's with the cups? I'm just going to have to take it. This is the cross I bear. Anyway, thank you for receiving. I totally lost my train of thought. I asked God to do what I could not do, and that was get into a mindset and heart of, I really just need to love Jesus today. I really just need to preach the same topic that Jason brings me in for like 6 years in a row to talk about because he's too afraid to do it for some reason. And I need to get to a place that I am not capable of getting to on my own. But the Holy Spirit is crazy capable, more than conquering, more than victorious in this area. And I'm just telling you about my minor grievances. You should have seen me 3 months ago when it was time to close down my own church and having to get on stage and preach then. So when we're talking about going to the well of love, the perfect love that the Holy Spirit has, it's a deep well and you can bring up tons of love up from it. And it never runs dry. And you might be saying, well, I'm going through some really hard stuff, some painful stuff. The pain is so deep, the hurt is so powerful, there's no way there's enough love for that. And there is, and it might not be in your bucket that you can drop into that well, but everyone here has a good bucket with no holes in it. And we can all keep going to this well of perfect love, and every one of us can keep pulling out perfect love, and there will never be a time where we accidentally get that wrong. But there will be plenty of times where we might not be 100% great at being there for each other, but the Holy Spirit is 100% great at being there for us. And this is where you and I need to get over the fear. At some point, you've got to trust that Holy Spirit who caused Jesus to come up from the grave. That same Holy Spirit is teaching everyone in this church how to love each other better every day. And so you might be thinking, if I unlock this one secret I've kept forever, what if they all bail on me? They're not, because the Holy Spirit doesn't bail on us. He's there forever. You and the Holy Spirit forever. So what we're not asking you to trust each other so much as we're asking you to trust the Holy Spirit. Do you believe in him or not? And if you believe in him, then you should know he is here in me, he is here in you, he's here in your neighbors, and he is all the same, no matter where he's standing in at this moment. So if you trust the Holy Spirit, you can trust your neighbor to help you deal with some stuff, to help you carry a burden that's way too heavy for you. You can trust that Holy Spirit in your neighbor. So, how do we get onto that? Third point I have is this thing that Solomon wrote about. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. It's a really cool phrase. I think about it a lot. Guys don't get to braid things much. It's just not a part of our DNA. But I do find it fascinating how the braiding works, especially if you see like a really good rope. Guys, if we see a really good rope, we'll go, wow, that's a really good rope. Wonder how that came to be. Especially if it's a really big rope. I don't know if you've seen a big rope in a while. It's always magical. If you go on a cruise sometime and they let you out of the boat, go walk by a few ropes, guys. It's a good 5 minutes there you can spend. Anyway, when you look at a rope and you see how many individual strands go into it, and I really do wonder the process of the braiding of the rope. Is it a machine that does it? It's got to be machines by now. But as you look at all the strands that are involved, and then you just realize there is no pulling this thing apart. It is literally impossible to rip a rope with your bare hands. It cannot be done because there's so many strands that aren't just together side by side, they're interwoven into each other. Each and every one into each and every one. And if there's like, I don't know, 70 of them like I see in this room interwoven like that, you cannot rip it apart. The cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. It's a really powerful metaphor. Now, as I pray about this metaphor, I wonder, what's my third strand? Bingo. Third strand's Jesus. Solomon doesn't know it, but I know it. The third strand that we all have is Jesus. And so I want to take some time to remind you of what Jesus did for you and I so that we could love one another really well and trust one another really well. You see, when I'm telling you about, hey, we need to get willing to be humiliated, humble each other, that's what bridges the gap so that we know how to be there for each other. I can say that confidently to you that this is a good idea of how to help each other, being publicly humiliated to each other, being publicly humble to each other, reveal some things you struggle with. I know this works because Jesus on the cross, that's exactly what he did. Jesus literally was stripped down to so much nudity, then was arrested like a criminal and treated like a criminal and sentenced to death like a criminal, all so that he, through his humiliation, could then lead you to the Father to be saved. And it totally worked. Jesus on the cross, suffering all sorts of embarrassment and humiliation, saved us all. So we know from that example, humiliating yourself, saying things that are embarrassing about yourself, actually works. It actually saves souls. It totally works. Again, if you're not in the practice of revealing personal things about yourself to people that you're not married to or so on, I can see why it's difficult. But then this brings me to my conclusion. I just know from experience, sitting in the Hokinsons' living room 12 years ago in a life group with a bunch of people I didn't know, and I can just remember the time I opened up to them about struggles I had, every single one of those guys were there for me. And then as I opened up, they opened up. And as they opened up, other people opened up. And then all of a sudden, we have a church plant. So what you need to understand is this type of vulnerability, this type of open-handed honesty, this type of authenticity is very contagious. And when you get help from one another like that, it becomes a lot easier to offer help like that. And when you get contagious like that, who knows what God can do through you? When that cord of 3 strands is really not breaking and really helping everyone out, you begin to become a real church family, and the outside people finally see what they've been missing this entire time, and it's been a life without love. And what they see in you is real love. And again, you might be trying to make some sort of weird excuse, as if I haven't been convincing enough on this argument. You might be saying, yeah, well, it might not work here. And I'm telling you, I was doing this when I was 16 with a bunch of teenagers saying, here's my super ugly sin struggles that I need help with. And the teenagers were good at helping me out. Teenagers. They can't even drive well. But they were incredibly trustworthy, They were incredibly good about not gossiping. They were incredibly good at being supportive and praying for me and high-fiving me when I got some victories in my life. In fact, I look back at that youth group somewhere in Missouri back in the 90s and I go, wow, I think they'd all be pretty proud to see I made it to preaching one day. Friends, I don't know how to say it for like the 80th time now. You just need to get over it. Whatever this fear is, fear does not come from Christ. So whatever the thought is, Jesus isn't the one giving you that thought. So who is? Is it your sin-filled flesh? All right, well, he's a liar. She's a liar. Is it the enemy from hell? He's a liar too. In fact, he's the prince of lies. Whatever fear you have about this, it's a straight up lie. So you just need to ditch it. Let's go with the honesty. And Jesus' truth is perfect love drives out all fear. And Jesus' love is in each and every one of us who have been born again. So let's just go to the well of perfect love and let's get all the help we need and let's become more Christ-like and let's be really good at just admitting none of us here are really good Christians. Jesus is great. I'm just happy to be his. So if we go with that humility, I think we can not only make each other have better lives, we can lead a lot of lost people to this great well of love as well.